You're listening to the ProgAxia podcast.
Hi, it's Andy Phillips here and welcome back to the ProgAxia channel. This is my top 5, where I talk to musicians about the albums that influenced them and shaped their lives. And today we have the keyboard player with progressive rock band Fragile, Max Hunt. Hi Max, how you doing?
Yeah, great, thanks. Really good to see you. Good
And you.
Great subject.
Thanks for sending these through.
It's a pleasure. Enjoy.
Love it. So, keyboard player, predominantly keyboard player with the band Fragile, which you've got your new album out now, which is really, really good. As good as the first one. I got Russ Wilson, the drummer with Fragile, sent me through the very first album, Golden Fragments.
Yeah, Golden Fragments.
Just blew me away. Really great music, and this is a really good follow up. So really, thanks for that. We're going to go through your top 5, and how easy was it for you to put these together?
Well, it was quite quick, actually, wasn't it? I think it was about 2 hours. It took.
Yeah, you did send them through quite quick, because it's one of those things that I've been doing this for a bit, and everybody I've asked has said it's really difficult to actually just hone it down to 5. Can I have 10? And
I think it was, but for me, that the albums that have influenced me the most, the 5 albums that have influenced me the most, were the earliest ones that when I was youngest, that I heard very, very young, basically,
right.
So they were the ones that had the biggest influence on me, for sure.
Yeah,
they are amazing albums. That's the thing. So whatever I've got into since then, I've always gone back to these and never ever got tired of listening to them. So.
And that's really important as well, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
So, should we kick off with your number 5?
Number 5. So, here is number 5. Great. Yeah, the first Floyd album I heard, and I think it was actually the late 70s when I heard it first.
Yeah, this is Pink Floyd, because we do an audio podcast. So
So it's Metal by Pink Floyd. Yeah,
Metal by Pink Floyd. Yeah.
1971, wasn't it, originally?
So
and it was the first Floyd the first Floyd I heard, and I think it's really interesting because it was formulating their sound. You can hear how their sound was developing into what it became on Dark Side of the Moon and the Wall. And but it's one thing for me, progressive music is a type of musical fantasy land, in a way. It's a door to sort of fantasy, magical musical expression, if that makes sense. And I think Echoes really affected me massively. Echoes. To the extent that I think it even played into a reoccurring dream that I had in my teenage years, which involved flight. And it's really interesting, but there are some lines of text from the song Echoes that that influenced this idea of flight across a coral ocean, basically.
Wow.
And so I've written a song about it on my new album, Hope, actually. The song's called Ascending. Thank you. I try not to plug it too much. But the song's called Ascending. Yeah. But it's basically, that song is about my reoccurring dream. It's trying to describe what the dream was like. But so it's really interesting. You could say that song is influenced by Echoes by Pink Floyd, but through a dream. And I'm sure that this dream was triggered by listening to Echoes.
Yeah, I think you're right when you sort of say, well, it was something that Paul talks about, Paul Googe, or Dr. Prog as we call him.
Yeah.
We've talked about albums that are staging albums before the big ones, you know. So, you know, Dark Side of the Moon is obviously huge
Yeah.
Pink Floyd album. The one that most people know. You saw it when you go around people's houses that have got, like, you know, Demis Roussos and, you know, and Bing Crosby, and then you suddenly pull it out and there's Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. It's like, wow. So everybody's got one. But he was saying that this album, this metal album, was an album which they had to do to get to that point. And
I think so. Yeah.
Echoes obviously was the key to it.
Number, but I mean, the whole album is awesome. And I think there are tracks that Pillow of Winds and Fearless are very underrated tracks, I think. Beautiful songs, both of them. And of course, One of These Days is tapped into, for me, a real sort of aggressive angriness in my teenage years, you know. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Echoes was one of those tracks that when I first started buying albums, which is sort of 76, I guess, 75, 76, 77, when I was buying a lot of stuff, and I really got into Pink Floyd, and I got into things like, you know, Dark Side of the Moon and Animals and Wish You Were Here, which is like the little trilogy, which is sort of my Pink Floyd era. Yeah. And I had to go back to this one. I didn't have this, and so I probably bought this in, I don't know, I guess something like 77 or 78 even. And I didn't really know too much about it, but one thing we did do was we went to the cinema. We used to go to late night cinema and watch, you know, really strange movies and late night cinema. And one of the things that was on was Live at Pompeii.
Yeah, right.
And I saw that sort of 77 and things like that, and that had a real effect on me. What did that you?
Yes, it did. Yeah, I found the original film didn't have a lot of the documentary footage in, did it? It had more of the concert and other sort of artistic footage from Pompeii, and I really got into that. But I mean, there was an awesome version of Echoes, live version of Echoes on there, which is,
and I think that's the thing that sort of, you know, just drove me to go and listen to this properly, because when I first bought it, I put Echoes on straight away. Went straight on to Echoes, listened to that, and I loved it. I found I loved Echoes, and never really gave the rest of an album much of a listening to. I just kept on playing Echoes.
Right. Yeah.
Don't know
just
why. You know,
there's a whole side, so just leave the side on.
But you know, after a while, you start listening to all of it, and it's a fantastic album, and I say a transitional album between that and, you know, that big trilogy of albums they brought out.
One of These Days became a regular addition into the live set, didn't it? Even during the 80s, you know, it was a regular.
And wonderful musicianship, and the thing that always got me with this, and I think which is especially on this album as well, is, and I think again, especially on Echoes, is this use of space as opposed to trying to fill everything with notes. You know, there's just like this wasteland of space, but it's like this beautiful sound.
Absolutely, yeah. Creating a huge sort of atmospheric picture, really. You know, it's amazing how they did that. And that, I hadn't really heard that before, to be honest with you.
Because everybody sort of just like, you know, puts songs in, don't they? It's like, it's got a song and it's got to be a beginning. We've got to get into it quick and things like that. And Pink Floyd just threw that rule book away. Yeah.
I think Rick Wright is a very, you know, as a keyboard player myself, I think he's a very underrated keyboard player, Rick Wright. And he's never been known for very clever, you know, for playing, very technically clever playing. But he is actually classically trained, and his note choice is absolutely impeccable. His chordal arrangements are absolutely stunning, and couldn't ever be done any better than that, you know.
I suppose it's
because a lot of it sounds very simple, but it's actually really good. It's really substantial what he's playing in a lot of this album, you know. So
I'm just wondering if when people do sort of make these comparisons, and when you look at the contemporary keyboard players at the time, you had Tony Banks and Rick Wakeman were the sort of big ones, and they were
Yeah,
really big and bold and brassy and flashy
yeah,
with
yeah,
huge solos, and Rick Wakeman with his cape and just all that sort of stuff, and Rick Wright wasn't that. He was he sort of did landscapes of music. It was just
yeah, yeah,
which he sort of fell into, and starting with stuff prior to Metal, but I think Metal it seems to be the album that just encapsulated that so well.
yeah. And it started forming the classic sound as well, that obviously came to fruition on Dark Side and beyond.
Yeah. So Metal,
Cool.
Pink Floyd, fantastic album. Let's move on to your number 4. If I can find somewhere to put this.
Okay. Then, Elias of Sunhello, John Anderson. Oh, we snap. We both got the same. And what a fantastic package, Book.
It is
6 pages. Yeah. I actually reread the story yesterday. The first time for years, and I had to put my reading glasses on to do it this time. So.
And what did you get out of that? I mean, was it interesting story? Because
it was, yeah. Because it's written in typical John Anderson conversational, and he actually does talk like that.
Yeah.
Privately, I've had a few dealings with John, and he does talk like how it's written in there. It's sort of not necessarily in complete sentences, but following through ideas and building and building and building on ideas of thought. It's what he's like, and it's just wonderful. So, John Anderson is one of my biggest all-time influences, and my biggest influences in music are actually not keyboard players. Even though I do have keyboard players that have influenced me, obvious choices, Rick Wakeman and Tony Banks, 2 examples. But John Anderson for me is a bigger influence on me, I think, musically than anyone else. And I think this album really, is it 70s? So actually, this was right in your sort of period of starting to buy albums, wasn't it?
Absolutely,
76.
yeah.
But it's just incredible what he achieved. I think absolutely incredible what he achieved on his own in his studio. And there's been a lot of talk about whether Vangelis collaborated with him on the keyboard parts. And I mean, one thing that's very evident is that he had. There's a keyboard that was actually launched in that year called a Yamaha CS80, and John Anderson had one. Of course, he had record company backing and was able to have the top keyboards of the time, in his studio. And he is capable of playing everything on that album. But a really interesting thing about John is that every time I've ever seen him doing anything on keyboards, whether it be on videos or live concerts, he never uses his thumbs. He always plays the keyboards with 4 fingers on each hand, which I find really unusual. I just couldn't do that, but knowing, having been taught classically, and it just doesn't make sense to me, but he makes good sounds with it. And that's one thing. I think John Anderson's actually a very underrated musician. He's got, his timing is impeccable. His rhythm is awesome. He's got a fantastic sense of rhythm. And then chordal and note-wise, he's actually fairly simplistic, but he still employs good, interesting note and chord choices. It's not just completely limited by his lack of technique. He's got enough musical whatever it is, in his mind to, and he's got the ability to record that, to put that down, to perform it, but having seen him a few years ago playing solo, just him on his own, you know, when he did that, I think it was the last solo tour he did in the UK. I saw him at Under the Bridge in Chelsea, and he was just playing mostly his Martin Strumstick, which I think is just a three or four stringed instrument.
Right.
Really simple chords, but great rhythms, and absolutely locking down the rhythm so solidly. And you know, his voice was great. But the thing is that he could back himself rhythmically really competently. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And there was no sort of apology about his lack of ability or anything. It was what it was, and very good, you know, really good performance. And
one of the things that sort of interests me with John Anderson, and I think that a lot of people don't realise, but he was instrumental in writing a lot of Yes stuff. I mean,
absolutely.
actually, it was his vision.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Close to the Edge and all that. So I mean, you know,
Gates of Delirium. Gates of Delirium. He according to Chris Welch and what other various people have written, you know, the fact that he actually played what he could of his ideas on piano to the band, and he certainly was you know, a musician member of the band. I mean, he played a lot of rhythm guitar parts on Yes numbers.
Yeah.
That the songs would be lost without. You know, it's simple rhythm parts, but the songs would lack if they weren't there. You know. And Yes, that's interesting. So.
This album, though, it's different from Yes.
Very, very.
And so, what was it about this album that, you know? Because to put it into your top 5, it's got to have, you know, a massive meaning to you when you started listening to all this sort of stuff, and this must have grabbed you differently to, I don't know, to Relayer. And
yeah, like absolutely. I mean, for one thing, it's a concept album about based on a science fiction story, essentially, and it does it so fantastically. It tells that story so fantastically. I think the album. You know, the sounds of the 4 tribes chanting and singing is believable, and for me it taps into this musical fantasy element of progressive rock, that it takes me somewhere else. It takes me away from reality to a form of escapism in a way, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, you know, not dissimilar to fantasy films in some ways, you know. But I think this is one of the best albums in that respect. The music is unlike any other band.
Yeah,
and it actually doesn't sound like a band. It sounds like a group of tribes people on a planet playing music, you know. And alien music sort of thing, you know, and it sounds like it. I mean, his use of the synths on it, he's playing, most of what he's playing on the synths are melodic lines with another melodic line over the top, with another melodic line over the top, all you know, very much like Baroque counterpoint, but without the training sort of thing, you know. But he just finds notes that work, and it's really interesting. I've had this very similar experience with Clive Bailey from Mabel Greer's Toy Shop, that he considered a keyboard, and he does it, and he sends me regular demos basically of just tunes, and he'll have a cello part, you know, with a flute part over the top and a violin part over the top of that, and then a rhythmic chant that he puts into it. And he's had no musical training whatsoever, but everything he sends me is musically good, you know. And I sort of find a little bit that Clive, for me, gives me a slight insight into what it may have been like, you know, in the early 70s with Yes and musicians like John Anderson. You know, they weren't necessarily highly trained to the level of classical concert musicians, but they were absolutely exceptional at what they did. But it was just so original and new, you know.
Yeah, you seem to
So
have like musical minds,
yeah,
and you don't really need to be classically trained to just have inspiration and have
no,
some
no,
vision.
no, no,
Helps
yeah.
sometimes, but
But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, not knowing musical rules and breaking gives rise to the breaking of a lot of established musical rules, gives rise to fantastic music.
yeah,
I mean, it's given rise to things like the Rites of Spring by Stravinsky. Also, and in a way, that's comparable with Elias of Sunhello in some ways. I think, but for me, I think I first heard Elias of Sunhello in the early 80s, 80 or 81. And it really did just take me on a voyage.
yeah.
I think
I
it
remember
does it
buying
so
this.
well. Yeah, yeah.
And big Yes fan at the time.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
bought out loads of Yes albums, and been to see them, and just really really into Yes. One of my favorite bands out there. And I remember seeing this in a record shop, and just the cover is so. It's such a great cover,
It is,
with
yeah.
this little
Yeah.
fella here, this little ship,
Yeah, yeah.
which actually was on the Fragile album. It's that all
Yeah,
comes from
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of stems out of that. And
That's right.
people
And that's
telling me,
that's a lovely thing. It links in with it, doesn't it? It's
yeah,
almost like
yeah,
he's written a story based on Roger's first artwork for Yes, which was on the Fragile album, was a planet exploding, wasn't it?
yeah,
And this ship floating above it,
yeah. He's got
Elias.
this, yeah. I mean, the Fragile album's got that sort of that exaggerated, almost cartoon version of the world, the planet.
Yeah,
With
that's
sort of
right.
exaggerated trees and mountains and things like that. This ship on there, this
That's right. That's right.
this
Yeah,
little ship here, and and that's what sort of grabbed me. And I was thinking, this is fantastic to link
yeah,
it from
yeah.
there to this album. And then when you listen to this, it's different from Yes. It's not a Yes album, but it's
No, no.
everything that Yes is.
It is.
Very
It is. Yeah.
bizarrely, it's like
Yeah, yeah.
and it sort of shows you, I think, that John Anderson sort of is Yes. The reason why
Mm.
Yes is like that is because of John Anderson, and
Oh, he's a massive part of Yes. His musical input is really important.
because I think him and Steve Howe, isn't it? It's just basically John Anderson and Steve Howe are what created that, and then everybody else piles in and puts their stuff in. Chris White bass just blows your mind, and Rick Wakeman or Patrick Moraz, I just make all that whole up. But it is John Anderson, and I think listening to some of this, and if anybody hasn't got this who's a Yes fan, you're missing a massive treat with this. It is absolutely, it's a beautiful album as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And of course, it was the year that all the members of Yes did solo albums.
Yeah.
So Fish Out of Water and
another big favourite of mine. I love that album as well.
Yeah.
I'm just a sucker for Yes. I think that's the problem. So Elias is saying hello.
You're not alone.
John Anderson, fantastic album. So that was your number 4. What's your number 3?
Number 3, Selling England by the Pound.
Selling England by the bloody pound. What a great album this is.
All that American influence, it was a bit against that, wasn't it?
Yes.
1973, yeah. Great.
So what was it about this little fella here, this wonderful album?
It's one of the albums I heard in the late 70s that my mother had bought and was playing. And I just I found it actually really accessible immediately, because it is, I think, very accessible immediately. But then, over the years of playing and playing, I mean, as a teenager, I used to have it just on constant repeat in my bedroom, I was playing it constantly. This, and I think First for Fifth and Cinema Show in particular stand out to me as my favourite tracks on it. But over the years of appreciating this album, I think I've come to the realization that for me, it's the high point of the band as it was with Peter Gabriel. I mean, I do love The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, but it's such a different album.
Yeah.
And it's so different from the development up to and including Selling England by the Pound. So, and that's the sort of Genesis I'm really into, is that early Peter Gabriel period. I mean, I think The Lamb Lies Down was a contender, actually, when I was trying to come up with the 5 top albums. But I think the thing for me that lets down The Lamb a little bit are that some tracks that were necessary for the live show, like The Waiting Room, for example, didn't work so well on the album. I think, they were a little bit more. Well, it was essentially actually improvisation, which it was quite unusual for Genesis, just to sort of improvise around a load of weird sounds. I mean, another interesting thing: all of the Genesis tracks before the Genesis albums and tracks before The Lamb, all of the keyboard parts would be played as they were written. All of the guitar parts as they were written, all of the bass parts as they were written. There were very, very few improvisational sections in the music at all. So it's very, very constructed. And that was different on The Lamb. Fly on a Windshield, the mellotron part that Tony Banks plays on that, he never played it the same twice, which is very unusual.
Yeah, because
it's a very different sort of concept to what Genesis had been, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why I do like The Lamb, because it is a massive departure. I mean, I love this. So
it's actually a progression, isn't it? It's
a progression.
The Lamb. But for me, the pastoral sort of English Genesis is what I love the most, in a way.
Yeah.
And this is the ultimate culmination of that in perfection, in a way,
And as you've mentioned a couple of tracks, Firth of Fifth and Cinema Show, absolutely wonderful. Whenever I do my radio show, I put Cinema Show on a few times, but I can't play it without putting Isle of Plenty on as well, because it doesn't. Yeah. You can't stop it.
No.
You have to put Isle of Plenty on as well, and it's it's definitely so weird.
Yeah.
What about?
I've performed it live with a couple of different tribute bands.
Okay.
And we've never performed the Isle of Plenty afterwards. And
you must do that.
It lacks, doesn't it? It misses it,
Yeah,
it really does.
You must do that. You can't have one without the other. It's impossible.
No.
But what do you think of because there's the contentious track on here, which is the Battle of Epping Forest, which people sort of either don't like or like. I love it. I mean, I love this whole album. Just the vibe of it all. But what do you think of the Battle of Epping Forest? Is that
it's one of my favourite tracks. One of my favourite Genesis tracks. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so bizarre because speaking to Genesis fans, it's like it's a fantastic album except Battle of Epping Forest. I'm going,
it's weird.
It's great. Yeah. I love it.
I think the one track that's a little bit of a throwaway is More Fool Me.
Yeah, everybody says that. Yeah,
and it's a shame because Phil could sing, I think, better than he did on that track, but it was a soft ballad. That's the thing. It was a soft.
Yeah, his vocals on this, for some reason, knowing what he became.
Yeah.
I don't think of that strong, and it's almost sounding like I don't really want to sing, but I'll sing it if you want me to sing. I'll sing it.
But I mean, if you listen to his backing vocals on this album and earlier albums, his voice as a backing vocalist was much stronger than it was on More Fool Me.
Yeah.
So I think he tried to sing it softly, and it just doesn't come across great on the recording. But that's the
Yeah.
only. I don't find it puts me off the album. That's one thing, it's.
Do you know what I used to do when I was a kid, when I was listening to this, when I first got this? And you don't sort of tell people these sort of things, but whenever first or fifth finished, I just lift the needle off and put it onto the next side. I never really listened to More Fool Me that much,
Yeah.
After hearing it a few times, you sort of think, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a shame, really, because I think you could have actually. It could have actually been a lot better if it was just like more force in it, and he just. It doesn't sound like he's taking it seriously.
No.
And it's a bit light and, as you say, a little bit throwaway. But yeah. Dancing in the Moonlit Night, mind blowing. I know what I like. Again, this is another sort of contentious track with Genesis fans.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know why, because I think this is a fantastic live track as well. It's whimsical.
Yeah. It was their first top 40 hit, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is good. It is a good song. It's well crafted. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fall into the same category as Dancing. The other big numbers. But,
I think what we've got here is
it's got the same band sound, hasn't it? It's got the same band sound, and it works.
I think what you've got
sonically,
here is it's sort of Tony Banks it really sort of writes most of this stuff, and I think I know what I think was a sort of Steve Hackett idea, which sort of started blossoming into a little bit of a jam. Sort of blossoming into a vibe, and sort of the rest of the band said, "Yeah, this is quite funky. I like doing this, And they probably played it a few times and thought, "No, this might make a live thing." And I think Tony Banks was going, "But I didn't write it. I don't like it."
He allowed some things to get past him, didn't he? Occasionally,
And I'm glad he did this one, because when you do see Genesis live, and even when I first saw Genesis live, it was with Phil Collins. I didn't have the chance to see him with Peter Gabriel, apart from the Six of the Best show at Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes wasn't Nebworth, was it? I can't remember which one of the two. Big outdoor thing. Anyway, I went there all day and got wet. And so I'd never seen Peter Gabriel live within Genesis apart from that. But even with the sort of Phil Collins thing, when they put a show on in '76, and when I first went to see them in '76, doing something I know what I like just got the audience up.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think it's a great track, and as I say, you've got the biggies on here as well, which is
yeah.
So awesome album.
Cool.
Influential for you because of Tony Banks's keyboards?
I think so. Yeah. More than anything. I mean, the piano intro and synth solo on "Know What I Like" is just absolutely awesome piece of music. And the 7/8 solo in Cinema Show is the most brilliant piece of keyboard composition, basically. It's really good. It's on a par with top symphonic compositions, I think, and it evolves musically in a very classical way as well, which is I'm a lover of classical Baroque and Romantic music anyway, so that definitely taps into me. But I did sort of play air guitar and rock around the bedroom a little bit to the 7/8 rhythm in Cinema Show as a teenager, so because it's a pretty awesome rhythm,
Yeah, it is a stunning album. Probably one of the well, it's seen as the best Genesis album.
Yeah.
Of all time. It's like topped charts time and time again, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And for good reason. So
yeah, indeed.
Selling England by the pound, Genesis, fantastic. So now we're getting to your number 2. And this one, when you sent over your list, surprised me, I got to tell you.
Heaven and Hell, Vangelis.
You do the red one, I'll do the blue one. All right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, this, see if I can get it in this picture, is the reason that I am a keyboard player.
Wow.
It was that when I saw that picture, I want to be a keyboard player. I want to be a keyboard player.
I get that
completely. I want to play the keyboard.
I get that completely. I have the same thing when I see like Neil Peart's drum kit from 1976. You know.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's what I want to do. I want to play behind that. But yeah, so Heaven and Hell. What is it about this album to make it your number 2? And the reason why I say it surprises me, because I honestly thought that I was the only person out of everybody I knew who had this album. I've spoken about this because I love it.
Yeah.
I've spoken about this to lots and lots of prog fans, and no one really knows it. No one really. I don't know any of my friends who have got this.
Oh, right, interesting.
And so I was when you put your list over, and I went, Heaven and Hell by Vangelis. Someone else has got this. And likes it enough to put it in their top 5. That's huge.
I mean, Vangelis is because I mentioned that John Anderson was one of my biggest musical influences of all time, and there are 2 real big musical influences, and that is John Anderson and Vangelis.
Right,
are my biggest musical influences. But Vangelis. This was the first album I heard of Vangelis, and again, that was through my mother hearing it on the Sound of the 70s, Bob Harris on the radio, and buying the album. But I just got totally hooked on it. The variety, the massive variety of keyboard sounds, the portrayal of so many different emotions and feelings in music. It just absolutely blew me away, that one man could do that himself, But of course, it also introduced me. I think that was my first introduction to John Anderson, because I think I heard that before I heard Yes, I think.
Wow. So this is a big album for you then, because the keyboard sounds on this are astonishing. I mean, they were totally different to a lot of the actual vibe of this album is pretty unique. This is one of the reasons why I like it, because you hear keyboard. There's loads of keyboard albums, and there's loads of bands with keyboards at the time.
Yeah.
But this has a particularly unique vibe to it that I hadn't heard before.
No. I mean, the thing is, he used a huge variety of instruments, from pianos and traditional keyboards but also used synthesizer oscillators in ways that hadn't been done before on the keyboard side of things, but also played bass, percussion, drums, and all sorts of an interesting point I learned about this album is that it was the first one that he recorded in his Hyde Park Corner Nemo studios in '75. He'd only just moved to London at that time, and it was still under construction while they recorded this. So I think that's interesting that I've read something about it that alluded to the fact that there were buckets of plaster and concrete strewn around the place while they were recording it, So, and he mentioned in a quote something along the lines of, "There's no better way of getting a business up and running, but than actually just starting to work in it before it's ready. It does tend to focus the mind on completing it, So." But I think it's an amazing piece of music. I mean, there are such beautiful chord progressions and synth patterns and keyboard patterns that build and build and build and build. But I think obviously "So Long Ago, So Clear" is an awesome song, but the composition of that song "So Long Ago, So Clear" is it's so good from even a classical standpoint. It's not in the realms of a traditional band work
Sure.
at
Yeah.
all. But it stands as a really, really good composition, you know, and I think any serious classical musician would agree with that.
Yeah, 'cause I think with Vangelis, I mean, you know, him and John obviously had a friendship before this and wanted to do something together, because Vangelis was one of the keyboard players that was possibly going to go into Relay before Patrick Moraz.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think they actually wanted Vangelis more than anything else.
yeah,
But it seemed like Vangelis didn't really want to travel and he didn't want to tour too much. I don't think he really wanted to get into the band thing.
yeah,
It would have
yeah.
been interesting to see what Relay would have been like
It would have
with
been very
Vangelis.
interesting.
I mean,
Yeah,
I love Relay as it is. I love Patrick Moraz's keyboards in it.
yeah. Mm.
I'm not saying that Vangelis should have been in there, and
No, but it would have been very interesting.
but it would have been really interesting to see what Relay would have been like.
Yeah.
With someone like Vangelis and the sort of especially if he brought some of these sort of sounds into it as well.
Yeah.
As I say, they're pretty unique. So
it's interesting. I'm trying to think when it was. It was 2006. It was the second year that with Fragile we actually did a few shows with Steve Howe's. So me and Galinda were living down in North Cornwall at that time, and he invited the whole band down to his house in Romanley in Devon, which of course is the house that the farmhouse that Yes rented to write the Yes album.
Right.
And what Steve actually, after the Yes's first big chart hit with Roundabout, he used the money to buy the farmhouse. And but that was really interesting because Steve's studio has still got speaker cabinets from the time of Vangelis, and the archery target, because Vangelis was big into archery at the time, obviously, and he was practicing archery in between music sessions and hung up the target board on one of the doors in the studio, and obviously nearly killed Steve on one occasion. But it's quite interesting because that was the room where we were in, was the room that they were trying out with Vangelis. So he transported all his gear. Because I think Vangelis was living in Paris at the time. At that time. He still had a studio in Paris, I think, then. So, yeah.
So, yeah, cool. Fantastic album. Heaven and Hell, Vangelis. If you haven't heard this one, then go and check it out because it is really, really good. And I love the cover as well. I love the sort of the hell on one side and the heaven on the other. And
yeah.
Like and as you say, that photograph in the middle, where you've got all those keyboards there, that would have inspired everybody. And then the photograph on the other side, where it's like a time lapse one.
Time lapse, yeah.
With all these, just like everything going on. Fantastic. That's a really good thing. So that was number 4.
That was number 4.
Yeah, what was I saying?
I was just going to mention Varna Varauti, I think her name is, the female vocalist that features on side 2.
Yes.
Greek singer, but her voice is absolutely out of this world. It really is.
Yeah.
On Heaven and Hell. Yeah.
Some great stuff on it.
Yeah.
So let's move on to your number 1.
Number 1 is Close to the Edge. Right? Yes.
Just going to put the because that's what's actually close to the edge to me was that inner sleeve. When I remember when I bought this and put it on and things like that, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I love this. And when I opened the moment I opened that up and saw this this beautiful artwork from Roger Dean. That is the track, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, yeah.
Just
You
sums
can, you
everything
can
up.
see the corner, the river, the corner.
Yeah. So what was
But
about
the
this
thing
one?
is, you had to buy it. You had to buy the album to
You had
see
to
that.
buy the album. Yeah, exactly. And of course, the albums in them days, you got because you got your inner sleeves and they're big enough.
Yeah,
You get the artwork and all that sort of thing, but you also get all the lyrics in the right place.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, what was it about this one that just put?
Um,
I mean, it's obviously your number one, so it's obviously like
it
the
is, and yeah, yeah.
one it's
So
influenced you the
I would
most.
have heard this. I think it was again my mother bought this, but I think it was around a similar time to Heaven and Hell that she did actually, around closer to sort of 75, 76 that I first heard it. I hadn't. Well, I was obviously very young. You know, I was under 10 years old. So but yeah, I just couldn't get over it. But it's difficult to describe how it became so important to me, really. But I couldn't understand it when I first heard it. I think I had to listen to it about 3 or 4 times actually before I could get into it. But then I started appreciating more and more and more and more of it. But things that immediately hit you are the end of the end of I Get Up, I Get Down, when it goes into the big organ and synth part.
Yeah.
And the lovely acoustic parts and big symphonic parts in And You and I, and things like, and the harpsichord solo in Siberian Khatru. Those things in particular are immediately sort of identifiable and powerful or delicate or whatever, you know, and awesome. But I think the rest of it, so a lot of the band, the band arrangements, well, they are absolutely incredible and do take a bit of getting into. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I can. This has a real. I mean, it would be in my top 5, definitely.
Yeah, yeah,
And only because of the way it made me feel at the time. I think I told you I was transitioning from this, listening to pop music and stuff like that about this time, because I probably heard this around sort of about 15, 16. And so I was transitioning between listening to, like David Bowie and Mark Bolan and the Sweet and, sort of glam rock stuff and that sort of thing. That's what I was really into. And then getting into things like the Judas Priest and stuff like that. And then suddenly this album came on the horizon. And I remember when I bought it and I put it on, it was profound. I mean, I hadn't heard anything like this before.
No,
at all. And it was rock music. Right. It was still beating.
It's very, very from the moment the band comes in. It's absolutely rock, isn't it? Really rock. It really rocks that opening,
and really challenging as well. I mean, the beginning of Close to the Edge.
Yeah.
Even when you listen to it today, I've listened to this literally 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But as soon as that sort of quiet intro, that birds singing, and as soon as that intro comes in, when it hits, that's a really challenging piece of music to listen to, even today, even after all this time.
Yeah.
That's mind blowing in itself when you think about it. When you're so used to an album like this.
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah.
And every time you listen to it, it just blows your mind again every single time.
It is a total mind blur. But the interesting thing for me is being the other side of however many years I've performed it live in tribute bands. I've really got, more than any other album actually, Close to the Edge, I've got to learn how it works, and that's one really interesting thing, that learning how it works has augmented my appreciation of it, not lessened it.
Yeah,
and that can be a problem, learning music actually,
because you've got people behind the veil, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's how they do it. That's not so odd.
But I mean, the thing is, with Close to the Edge, the song Close to the Edge, it's a case of, that's how they do it. Wow, that's amazing. Oh, it's really difficult. That's the reality of it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It sounds, again, this is one of the things that I can't understand how they actually put it together in such a way that, yes, there are some challenging parts here, but overall, when you listen to if you stick the album on and listen to the whole album, it just feels so organic. It feels alien but organic. I can't understand how that they can get those two sides into this, where it just feels very natural and very organic and just beautiful music.
I mean, a big point.
It's so complex,
Yeah. A big point about it is that Bill Bruford and Chris Squire were grooving together better than they ever did, and obviously never did again to the same extent. On that album, they'd reached their absolute pinnacle of achievement together as a rhythm section. That really added to it, the solidness and complexity as well, but the solid grooves. I mean, Siberian Khatru is actually a very funky groove.
Yeah.
But the groove in that is between Chris and Bill is awesome, absolutely awesome.
Yeah,
It's unique, in its feel.
Yeah,
they work together as a rhythm, and that never was replicated in Yes Again. Quite, not putting Alan down for 1 minute, but Alan was just.
I mean, I've defended Alan White.
Yeah. He's a wonderful drummer,
Alan
White. Absolutely wonderful drummer. But there was something special, I just think, that ended with this album.
Yeah.
But it was obviously such a tortuous process making it that it ended with Bill not being able to staying with the band. He had to leave. He couldn't stand it anymore. It was obviously a very fraught process.
But what came out of it was,
I
as you think as well, probably the best progressive rock album ever made.
I think so. For me, it is. Yeah,
arguably.
Yeah.
And I probably will argue with a few people, but I just think it is. It is the best one. And even when you go back to it and listen to it again, it doesn't feel dated. It just
it doesn't.
Music. It's just like, this is just.
No, I mean, I listened to it this morning actually, because I hadn't heard it for a few months, and every time I listen to it, I'm amazed about how contemporary it sounds.
Yeah,
because it's so different. It's so different. It doesn't sound dated. I mean, I guess the thing is, even Mellotrons don't really sound dated anymore, because bands are using Mellotrons again now, so
it seems to be a brand new sound.
I mean, even mainstream rock bands are occasionally using Mellotrons again, the digital.
Well, Mellotron emulators most of the time.
Yeah, that's
little plugins on their computers. Oh, it's got Mellotron in. What's that sound like? That sounds nice.
What I do.
Exactly. What do you have to do?
Yeah,
but no, I think that's a fantastic choice, and probably as I say, probably the best progressive rock album ever.
I mean, it taps into the fantasy escapism thing for me as well with music.
Yes,
it's so alien and unusual sounding that one can get lost in it, and the imagery, as you said quite rightly, the album sleeve imagery really helps with that as well. So.
He does, yeah. With the Roger Dean stuff, I've always loved on Yes albums. He's an artist that is part of Yes, as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't feel like a Yes album if it doesn't have a Roger Dean cover.
Right. Yeah.
So that's your number one, Close to the Edge by Yes. Fantastic choice. So let's quickly run down your top five. You had Meddle from Pink Floyd.
Yeah. Meddle Pink Floyd.
Elias is saying hello from John Anderson.
Yeah.
And
The number 3 was Sunny
Sunny in
England by
England,
the
yeah,
Pound.
which again is arguably one of the best progressive rock albums ever made.
Yeah. Number 2, Heaven and Hell, Vangelis.
Vangelis.
And number 1, Close to the Edge.
Close to the Edge, Down by the River. So that's a brilliant top 5, Max. I've got to tell you, it's absolute pleasure going through these with you, because they are fantastic albums.
Well,
which have you got any albums that sort of didn't quite make it but you wished you could have put in?
Yes, Lizard, King Crimson.
Right.
I love that because it's such a departure after the first 2 albums, and I've been getting into it recently, and getting easily into it, strangely. So I don't like it, by the way, only because John Anderson happens to appear on one track. It's not that at all, but there
is a thread going through this somehow.
I know, but that's not relevant really to it.
No.
On this. No, but I think it's great. I mean,
Paul Gujaby, who's on the podcast with me, my co-presenter on the ProgAxia podcast, is a big King Crimson fan, and I'm sort of not. I mean, I love different sort of stages of Crimson, but I'm not a whole of body King Crimson fan like Paul. No. But I'm getting into this album. He's actually being on the podcast has helped me to get into some stuff that I'd sort of.
It's interesting. Lizard doesn't sound like any other King Crimson album, and it's a band that only existed for that album. The band didn't exist before or afterwards. It was just a one-off project, really. But I think it's amazing. The music is absolutely really grabs me. You know? Yeah,
it is. And I say I'm getting into it because of Paul. He's brought me to the dark side, which is
it's definitely dark.
Always good. So what else? What other albums should have made
Heavy Horses, Jethro Tull.
Yeah,
Heavy Horses is my favourite Jethro Tull album. And I just got sort of warm, nice feelings basically from listening to it in the past. The nice English sort of. I don't know, but it's nice in English. But I love Rover. It's such a rocking song, you know. It's and obviously it's interesting. The song "Heavy Horses." I actually had a friend a few years ago that drank in a pub, which was a real old traditional country pub, not a gastro. I mean, I think it did in later years turn into a gastro pub, but there was a guy called Wally that used to drink in there, and he was an estate worker. He worked on the local estate for the the lord of the manor estate type of thing, and his father and his grandfather had all worked on the estate, and he used to tell us stories about. The fact that when he was a young kid, his father took him out in the fields to work, and when it got in the summer to his bedtime and he started falling asleep on the job type of thing, his father used to put him on a horse that knew the way home, slap the horse, and the horse took Wally home, and his mother took him to bed, sort of thing, you know.
That's wonderful. Yeah, because I mean, this album was again because it's sort of 78. Oh, it was I was 18 then. Bought this album when it came out. I was a big Jethro Tull fan. I've been to see them loads of times. And I went and saw them on this tour as well. And this is a I love this album as well. I mean, it's a bit different from the old sort of Tull stuff. But
it is. It's slightly less rocky, isn't it? It's a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's sort of more concise, and it's sort of we're doing an album. These are the songs. They're going to be great live as well. I mean,
very accurate. Yeah.
I do love a lot of this stuff, and just the opener. Like the Mouse Police. The Mouse Police never sleep. I love that.
And the song Moths is a lovely song as well.
Yeah. There's some really good songs, and it is a very, very sort of very late 80s Jethro Tull vibe to it. Which sort of cleaner and things. I mean, as I say, I'm a big Tull fan. I'm a big Tull, been a big Tull fan from the very first time I ever heard them.
Yes, Well,
just love
it's a
that.
big difference to Aqualung, isn't it?
Yeah,
For
oh,
example.
yeah.
And another
Aqualung's not darker.
album I really do like is what's the album that's got the hare who lost his spectacles on it?
Oh, I was talking about this just the other day.
Passion Play.
Passion Play, yeah.
Passion Play. That's
Passion
that's so different again, isn't it?
Yeah,
Completely
it is.
different.
Yeah, and I mean, I love Passion Play, but
Yeah.
the reason why I couldn't think of what album it was on because I never really played that track.
Yeah,
It's one of the tracks that I just, I play Passion Play, and when that came on, I tend not to listen to it. I just
Well,
ruins the flow and the
ended
vibe.
side one and started side
And started
two.
side two, and I just
Yeah.
never understand why they did that. It sort of ruined it for me. And I was like, because when when you in those days we used to do cassette tapes, you used to record albums on the cassette so we can play them in the car and things like that. I'd record Passion Play, but I'd always miss that out. So it just doesn't compute to me what album that's on because I've sort of blanked it out somehow.
Yeah, right.
Because that's the beauty of having doing the tapes. You can just put on what you want.
I think it's the only track title I can remember from Passion Play.
Listen, mate, it's been absolutely fantastic. We've got to our time now. I've really enjoyed going through these albums with you. And I'll put connections to the links to your Bandcamp stuff. So
many thanks, Sean.
Yeah, but definitely listen to this stuff. The Fragile stuff is really good. You got this is second album out, second Fragile album out.
All long
really
form
good.
pieces.
Claire Hamill on vocals. Just sounds really good, and your solo one's on there as well. Hope. I'll stick the links in below for that. But I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to do this because I know it's
a pleasure. Sure, really enjoyed it.
It's quite difficult to put five together that are these are quintessentially my life. But that's been absolutely brilliant. So Max, thanks very much for joining us. And guys, if you like this sort of stuff, then please subscribe to the channel and put some comments below, ask questions, all those sort of things. Let us know what your top five is. That's great because we've had that on a few of the top fives we've done. People have put, my top five is this, and it really gets quite interesting.
Definitely a good thing to do.
Yes, it is. Go. So thanks, Max. We'll see everybody next time. See you later. Yeah, thanks for joining us on the ProgAxia podcast. Don't forget to like this video and also to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us. We'll see you next time.